Always live lovely.
You are now listening to Breaking Barriers, a mental health discussion. I'm your host, Chetina Guadalupe. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, consultant, speaker, and singer. Breaking Barriers, a mental health discussion was created to provide examples of conversations with various people on stigmatizing topics, to break barriers so that you can be encouraged to go within your own community and have these same conversations. Each episode is timeless. There's always something that you can receive from it over and over again. We push the bar a little bit with the topics we talk about. That's why it's called Breaking Barriers. We speak about things that people typically aren't creating space for so that we can all receive healing. Share with everyone you know because of this. There's something that everyone can benefit from in each episode. If you like what you hear and would like to support Always Live Lovely, please donate. This helps us to be able to continue to provide free information on multiple platforms. I will leave the link below. We appreciate any support you're able to provide to keep this thing going. If you would like to stay connected with all things Always Live Lovely, you can visit us at www.alwayslivelovely.com. We provide individual mental health, therapy services, consultations, products, music, information on upcoming events, and so much more. Don't miss out. And of course, if you like my vibe and you would like me to speak on your platform or at your next mental health event, connect with me at connect@alwayslivelovely.com. Enjoy the episode and remember, always live lovely.
Always living lovely. Just don't let the times go by. Do something. You don't gotta go outside yourself to prove nothing. You can lean on me if you need a hand. You can lean on me if you need a friend. You know that I got you. You know that we got you. Yeah.
Hello, lovely people. I am so excited to be back again with another episode of Breaking Barriers, a mental health discussion. And today I have a wonderful guest that I am super excited was able to join me today. We got a couple of things in the work, honestly, like some on her platforms, some stuff on my platform. But this is the wonderful B. Bailey. Can you please introduce yourself to the people?
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. I am B. Bailey, and I am a host and content creator. Original show is Virtual First Dates, which started on Instagram. And after that, I had several other YouTube series, moved on to my own YouTube, which is at Virtual First Dates. And that's, I guess I can go into that after at the end when I discuss my handle, but that's fine. And we stream live for my most current show, which is called Talks with V. And that's on the HBCU Lounge Network. And that's where we stream live every other Sunday at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And my content is just really centered around being better humans, having better relationships between Black men and Black women is where we started. And it's open to other things because anyone could learn from the content that is covered on this show. But that is where I started. That's, was kind of the point of starting, is because it was just like, we don't have enough, of these type of shows speaking about something positive in tools to work on the relationships between Black men and Black women, and just understanding each other, and really understanding the value with it, with the other. And so that's what kind of motivated me. We started obviously with relationships, since that's always a hot topic.
Right, all the time.
And I love love. And so it was natural for me to fall into that. And now we're talking about more topics surrounding just improving you and, you know, working on yourself before getting in relationships. So
Right,
that sums
right.
it up.
A lot of good work that she got going on, which is why I thought it would be very
Yes.
important to choose Miss B Bailey on coming
Oh,
on here so that we can talk about relationships. Because today,
mhm.
the topic we are going to be talking about is dominant women in relationships.
Ooh.
Because I just feel like dominant women get a bad rap sometimes, you know, when it comes to being in relationships. And also the simple fact that you are making platforms in a way for a positive outlook to be seen on like what
Mhm.
either ways people can grow in relationships or ways
Right.
people can grow in their relationship with themselves or even just, you know,
Mhm.
a healthy viewpoint is great because a lot of times all we're looking at is like reality TV. Or
Right.
since social media is such a big thing, we're looking at snapshots or edited versions of other people's
Mhm.
relationships, and everybody's in
Right.
the comparison game. That can even happen in real life as well. Everybody's in the comparison game. So it's great
Absolutely.
that you are like creating platforms to be able to just kind of speak to something that you felt may have been lacking in
Yeah.
areas within the community. And then so when we think about just the topic of dominant women in relationships,
Mhm.
when it comes to yourself, do you feel like you are a dominant woman in relationships? Like what has relationships been like for you thus far?
Well, well, first, well, first question. We'll start with that. If I, think I'm not, I honestly had to, I guess, think about it in a sense. And, it's so funny because I talked to my sister and she was just like, is that a question? She's like, and so I was just like, well, maybe I don't really understand, what it is. And so I was like, well, let me look
Mm-hmm.
up the definition. There's a couple of different definitions. And so one of the definitions that I think was most important, powerful in or influential, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so those are amazing things. And I think that I'm all of those.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is I there's so many different types of relationships. And
Right.
I probably will say that I am more so dominant, or I don't think about it, like that, when it comes to maybe work, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when it comes to work, I'm that way. When it comes to outside of work, where there's things that need to be done, um, I'm that way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one of those people that I'm like, no, this ain't gonna be raggedy,
Right.
And so I will, I guess, take a dominant approach to get
Mm-hmm.
things done, because in a sense, it's almost like you have to be more assertive when you're in charge, right?
Right.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it's necessary. But when it comes to relationships, I would say that I'm not. When I think about the boyfriends that I've, had
Mm-hmm.
um, in my past, mm, no, I mean, no, I mean, I've had three boyfriends, serious boyfriends, and then one, I guess, eh,
Ah!
I don't
Right.
know. I don't. I would. It was on again, off again, but there was a lot of respect there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say out of the four, I would say three of them, the men that that I was with, they were more assertive
Mm-hmm.
guys
Mm-hmm.
and more get into the business, and taking care of things. And so I didn't have to basically
Be
insert
in that
myself
role.
too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, be in that role because um, they were doing what needed to be done. And so, but I'm seeing less and less of that kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
um, in the more recent years, where in a lot of cases they need more guidance,
Mm-hmm.
or you might get with a gentleman that is great, sweet guy and things like that, but he may have been more raised with his mother,
Mm-hmm.
and or even having a father, but the mother like babied him, and
Mm-hmm.
spoiled him rotten. And so I think that in those cases it can kind of hurt when they go out into the world to date, because they don't understand what their role is,
Right. Role
and
confusion.
Right. And so they kind of go out into the world expecting that, same treatment as their mom. And I think that, in relationships, we kind of, there are some aspects of it that's like your parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you date a woman and, maybe there's some things that remind you of your mother, usually, well, hopefully those good qualities, of that sense of, okay, I know that she's going to have my back, right?
Right.
Uh, Maybe you look for someone who can cook like your mom because you grew up with great meals, and so you don't want to sign up
Mm-hmm.
for a lifetime of bad meals.
Of some top ramen, but
And
it's okay though. If you said, you
right,
said.
unless everything else is so great that you're just
Mm-hmm.
like, she can't cook.
Mm-hmm.
You might have to pray a couple times,
Mm-hmm.
before you eat her food. But it could be that kind of situation too. So I understand you looking for that. Like as a woman, I would look at the way that I was raised, by my father, my stepfather, and he was, or is, still, but was a provider, coming up. And when I say provider, I don't mean, a lot of times people hear that wrong. They're like, provider, that means Birkin bags and,
Right.
you know, Jimmy Choo's, just all these different things. And it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
no, that is extra. And
Yeah.
so, he was a provider. And so, and he was, he's protective, so no one was going to just like roll up or get too close to his family if they not,
Mm-hmm.
looking right, or like they have good intentions. And so that's very important to me. So for me, if I get an inkling, it's even suggested that you are a person that is not a protector, um, it won't go
It
anywhere.
won't do well. Mm-hmm. And if
Right,
that's
right,
like that's what you're used to as well. That's what you've seen,
right.
that's what you know.
Absolutely. And so as far as in the relationships, I would say no. At any moment where I feel like I need to be dominant in the relationship, or take that approach, because I don't really feel like I need to dominate over you, right? Um, if that feeling arises, it's most likely not going to go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, because I don't really think that I don't care for the term, because there's a lot of
Exactly. A
uh,
lot of stigma attached to
negative
saying you're a
stigma. Yeah,
dominant woman.
absolutely, absolutely. But even when you read the definition, I mean, there's some things that are great, like being important,
Powerful.
being
Mm-hmm.
powerful. Yeah, I'm those things. But and influential. I would want to have a partner that's those things as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I
Mm-hmm.
give you something that is so funny. A while back, a guy was it was like an online situation, and the guy, he was, okay, he was
Uh-huh.
a cute guy or whatever. Um, but he had asked me this question, and when he asked me this question, I kind of knew that it was the beginning of the end, right?
Okay.
And so he asked me the question, if I had to choose, would I say that I would be dominant or submissive, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so I immediately thought, okay, maybe I'm a little of both, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
am, like when it comes to work and getting to the business, then I'm more dominant, um, when it comes to things. But when it comes to a relationship, a
Right.
romantic relationship, a lot of the times, I'm more on the submissive side, because I like to think I'm with someone who I respect and I admire
Mm-hmm.
them, and I, respect their leadership, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so he asked me that question, then I was just like, I guess, I mean, I don't know, maybe submissive. And he was like, I would have thought Dom. And I'm like, you haven't even really talked to me,
Right. So how do you figure?
you just see my pictures, and so I'm just like, okay, but I have a presence about me, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that even when I'm quiet, it it speaks for
Mm-hmm.
itself, like my aura, right? And so, very interesting enough that I asked him, I said, well, if I am dominant, would that make my man sub,
Missive. Yeah.
right? Because he said dom or sub, so then that also raised my eyebrows. I'm like, oh, okay, he's on some BDSM type
Right.
stuff,
Because
right? And I'm like,
typically people are
sir,
leading in a sexual conversation if those terms come up most times as well.
yeah. And I'm just like, okay, all right, sir. Because there's been a lot of weirdos, out there
Mm-hmm.
lately. And so he was like, yeah, it would be, he would be sub. And so I was like, okay, so when you said that you thought I would be Dom, and you were like, you like that. Um, so would you say that you like being a sub, or you define yourself that way? And he was just like, yeah. And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh. I said, well, let me stop you right there.
Hold on, sir.
Hold on. And so I said, so um, for me, I think that however a person defines himself, is their business. Me, myself personally, I couldn't see myself being attracted to a man who considers himself as a sub, or submissive, because I mean, maybe I'm not educated on it enough, but all I'm thinking of is me in some latex with a whip and him crawling around on the floor with
Uh-huh.
a leash on. And that's my fantasy.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, no. So yeah. And I was like, but I wish you well. It's just not something I can just tell you right now. It's not, I'm
Right.
not interested, And so he was just like, okay, that's cool. I respect it. And then that was that. So
Yeah. And I mean, you brought up honestly a lot of good points, and one major theme that can be broken down, just the idea of roles. And I feel
mhm,
like roles have a lot of stigma attached to them off top when it comes to how a man should be and how a woman should be. And that came
right.
from years and years and years ago. And then so
Yeah.
when anything of a person's qualities fall outside of what we're taught from society and American standards of how the roles women play, the roles men play, when anything sometimes falls outside of that, even though we're a progressive nation sometimes, but
Right.
people tend to be sometimes progressive.
Yeah.
When anything falls outside of those, it's seen as like, bad or unattractive, or there's not really the space for that. And the interesting thing
Crazy.
is when like dominant can also be seen as independent. And then,
Mm,
but sometimes people feel more like powerful, like the definition said, when they're like independent. Yeah, I'm an independent woman. But when it's
mhm.
dominant, it's seen as like, ooh, that put a sour taste in my mouth. Like, what does that actually mean?
Right.
For
Right. Exactly.
submissive, that also gets a bad rap because
Mm.
women also a lot of times don't want to necessarily say I'm submissive, because then it seems like you're not a powerful woman. But then
Right. Or they
you're also
consider it
taught
as
to
weak, but it's not. It's just
exactly.
all of that is not understanding, like not knowing definitions, and
Hmm.
see
And
a lot of
roles.
that,
Hmm.
and roles and understanding like, both sides of it. I think a lot of time, and I speak about this a lot. Once I heard it, I just was like, so fascinated with when I heard I was watching Oprah, and Oprah was talking about someone that she, maybe a book, or it was someone that she had interviewed, and that man had said, once you call a tree, you'll never see a tree again,
Hmm.
right? And so basically, he was talking about labeling. And when I heard that, I was just thinking like that goes across the board to anything. When you
Hmm.
label someone as your partner, your spouse, if you're the more reserved, spouse, or let's say the other one is famous or well known in the city, it's like, oh, you're so and so's husband,
Yeah,
or oh, you're so and
automatically.
so's wife.
Hmm.
You
A
have no
label.
name,
Hmm.
no one knows anything about you. They don't care. They may ask, but they don't really care because you have been labeled as this person's partner, right? Or when you're in a relationship, with someone, once you put the title on it that we're girlfriend and boyfriend, or we're whatever it is that we
Right.
are,
It's a whole
what's
different level.
what's the status, then it's kind of like, oh, well, I got you now. A lot of
Hmm.
people, like, they have that complaint when they get married, a person just letting themselves go,
Hmm.
wife or the husband, because it happens with both. And it's just like, oh, okay, like I don't have to get to know you anymore.
Hmm.
And there's some wives that are like, okay, well, now it's like when we used to, when we're dating, it was so fun. Now you just like, you don't really like pursue me. I like that chase a little bit, like,
Hmm.
like I was just the hottest girl in town, and you just had to get me, or whatnot. or the same thing, men go through these midlife crises where they're just like, they want to know they still got it,
Right.
and instead of, expressing that I want to still feel desirable,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not
People
really
act out in
promoted.
different ways. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's not really promoted for them to express themselves, then it's kind of like I'm doing all this weird, crazy stuff because midlife crisis, because I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to, I guess, articulate what it is that
Right.
I'm wanting, and so then you go through all of that, and so yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, there's stigma also attached to the submissive part, because then that could be seen as sensitive or being overly emotional, whether for men or for women. Sometimes
Right.
those are used interchangeably too. But
Hmm.
I definitely feel like, if we strip down roles and
Right.
don't necessarily like categorize people as this or that, and we're just like, okay, who are the people and who are we dealing with? I feel like sometimes people can be interchangeable. Like you can be
Absolutely.
dominant and submissive, whether you're a man or a woman. And sometimes being dominant can mean like in certain, kind of like how you were saying, like, at work, you are more dominant. In relationship, you are more this. Sometimes in relationships, it could be like, okay, you have an area where you are more dominant. Like you have an
Right.
area where you
Right.
dominate the area, and then you have an area where you fall back and you're more submissive. And it could be the same way for the man. And something
Right.
that you said earlier on was like, when women feel like they have to take on that role. And I do feel
Mhm.
like you said, one thing you brought up is in the Black community. I do feel
Mhm.
like a lot of times, I know I've been surrounded around a lot of independent women in my life. And
Mhm.
sometimes that could be seen as like they're taking the gears and they're like, just plowing, being like the main people that's like, directing the relationship.
Right.
But sometimes I wonder, when women are put in those roles, like you were saying, is it because they feel like maybe the man they're with isn't stepping up, or do they feel like they don't have no choice but to do that, or due
Absolutely.
to things from historical ancestral things, do they feel like they can't trust the man to lead the relationship in the way that it needs to be done?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little of it could be any of that, right? I mean, the way that you're raised, of course, it plays a big factor of how you move, even if you say, "Oh, I don't want to act like this. I don't want to be like this parent."
Mm-hmm.
My parents raised me this way. I'm not doing that. And you want to fight it so bad that you become exactly that, or you're
Mm-hmm.
the they were extreme left, now you're extreme right, and then you create a problem there. And so it's super important about it being balanced,
Right. Right.
for certain. I mean, for sure, because with the balance, there is both of those things, not necessarily, I guess, the word, but just kind of what some traits, a few words that are in that definition,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
and and so yeah, like I was stating earlier with the gentleman, just like I don't mind you submitting to me on certain things that I am more knowledgeable, right? Because you're going to submit to my answer, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
submit to, I have more experience, in that situation, so you're going to like let me have it, let me take the lead on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
typically what you will hear. They may not
Right.
use the word like, "Babe, I'm going to submit." You're not going to hear it like,
Right.
"Babe, I'm going to submit to you on this." They're going to say, "I'm going to let you take the lead on that,"
Basically. Mm-hmm.
to save face because they don't want to
Mm-hmm.
be weak. They
Mm-hmm.
don't. They think the word is weak too. Unless you like
Exactly.
really.
All these stigmas attached to
Yeah,
the word.
absolutely. So it's like, unless you really know, right? And then not only you really knowing, but the person that you're talking to, that they know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then you can speak freely and not have to say, "Well, this," but let me speak in the terms that you understand, because this is how you view it. So now I know I
Right.
have to use this other word, so that you'll feel comfortable,
Right.
right?
Instead of it being
But
triggering, and then people all upset and they all in their feelings, and then people arguing left and right.
absolutely, for no reason. It's like we're saying the same thing. Like, chill out.
Uh-huh.
So, but yeah, that's what I would say. Balance is key, because you can take and appreciate a little bit of that, but also I would say, when you have to take that on, as a woman, that's where you see, you're hearing more and more about women being masculine,
Mm-hmm.
and the truth is that they're not talking about it as much of men being feminine.
Right. Because
It
that
feels,
does exist.
yeah, but I feel like I believe in conspiracy theories or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But, I do believe that there is agenda, to an extent, of feminizing men.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Maybe that's coming from the whole feminist movement or something. I don't know. But I do think that is, there is an agenda to feminize men, and it's not really talked about as much as you'll hear, women being,
More
called
masculine.
masculine, or she's so independent, and things like that. And you gotta, like jokes, about a
Right.
woman who takes charge, right? And so it's just like, okay, so is that for us to kind of, since it's not talked about as much, it's not like seeing, as many advertisements or like, things on social media.
Mm-hmm.
Is it so that we can kind of be sleep to that, and then it can
Mm-hmm.
just happen, and then you wake up and you got all these feminine men who are like, can you get the door for me?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
want to be treated like a lady. Like, well, I've never gotten flowers. I mean, well,
I ain't gonna lie. What was I was looking at, so there's another therapist, he's a Black therapist.
okay.
Um and he was talking about receiving flowers, and I really
Okay.
actually appreciated his video on that, and I like
Okay.
reshared it because he was talking about just like this whole idea of stigma and roles, and like how
Uh-huh.
men can get flowers. Like I bought my husband flowers once. I
Right.
need to buy him more flowers. He stayed buying me
If,
flowers, but I need to buy him more
if
flowers.
you like them
But I
though,
bought him.
right?
It's just like, I think it's like that concept of like everybody has their place, and if it's anything outside of that, then you're seen as weak. Like, why should you buy a man flowers? That's something that you do for
Right.
women. Now you're seen as a punk, or you're seen as sensitive, when it's just kind of
Right.
like, when people, the way I look at it is, I'm like, when people die, what does everybody bring to the funeral?
Flowers.
Flowers. Like,
You
whether the
you
person
don't
like it or
you don't
not,
you
the
don't see them
flowers are there.
bringing a 6 pack of some cold Bud
Yeah,
Light or some
they're bringing
Coronas.
flowers. It's
Yeah.
sentimental. It comes from a
Right.
space of like love and care. And he was
Right.
just like, this therapist was so grateful that somebody gave him flowers, because I don't know if he just never received it or not, but it felt good to receive something like that. And
Right.
he just kind of used his platform to break down the stigma a little bit of like, tending or caring for men in gentler ways as well, and that being okay, because in the
Right.
same way that women can be strong and it is okay, like
Mhm.
men can be sensitive and that is okay. And I know that we
Right.
sometimes like, it's so interesting because I don't know if you watch Married at First Sight, but in this
Yes.
last season we definitely saw a dominant woman and a more sensitive man roles play out to the T. Like,
Oh
it
my
played out
gosh.
to the T, to where it was like, okay,
Yeah,
you're
it was.
too dominant and you're too sensitive, and they were just going back
Mhm.
and forth. And I'm like, maybe sometime I wonder, maybe was there a way for things to be a little more balanced out? And sometime like, well, maybe the experts put them
Absolutely.
together so that she could have pulled out more of his strengths and he could have pulled out more of her sensitivities. But because of
Mhm.
the roles and because of the stigmas attached to it and because of what they were going in as, granted, he was very confident in his sensitivity. But of course, in the
Right.
world, they probably like, this crybaby. But it's just like, because of all these different
It
stigmas
was a
attached
lot.
to it. Yeah, like she came in with like, this too much for me. Like, so their relationship
Right.
wasn't going to go anywhere from the very beginning because she wanted somebody that was more dominant, even though she's a dominant woman in the relationship. She
Well,
probably wanted to take on a different role. She probably wanted to be more submissive, but there was no space for her to
right.
do that.
Right. And that kind of goes back to the point. I mean, watching her, I don't know. I mean, I had so many different thoughts
Mm-hmm.
about her, Miss Lexus. And so but I think that those two were drastic. So for instance, if someone were to say, okay, Citrus says, yeah, you definitely could, fall in the dominant category. I would say that there were levels,
Right.
to it. And I would say that I'm able to go back and forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it be genuine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a genuine space for me to be like soft and submissive and things like that. And I like being that. There's some times where that's like my happy place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in her case, I feel like it's more so a role play when she
Mm-hmm.
is being submissive. And I think that the only time she really would like to be submissive is in the bedroom,
Yeah.
right? And so there's that. And but what I would say that we would both be alike in, because I'm not really a fan of her, but I can see some things that I
Mm-hmm.
understand where she's
Where you're
coming
like,
from,
we here.
is that I can't take a man who's sitting there just overly sensitive. Being
Mm-hmm.
sensitive and expressing your emotions is
Mm-hmm.
great. But when you're overly sensitive, and as a woman, I have to go grab you the tissues because you're crying in every little moment, and you feel like your feelings are hurt and things like that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you know, I think people start trying to adapt in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see, this is something that I mentioned, is that when you see a woman who is acting masculine, it's a sign that she has been uncovered,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know, because she is taking on this role because it's not filled.
Yeah.
And so, someone else is taking what she might think is her role. And so since they're doing that, she's just like, okay, well, there's two roles that need to be played, in this
Right.
thing. And I mean, it could, some people are, I have a friend and she is masculine, and her guy, her husband, is more, I think he's a little bit more, just more more sensitive,
Yeah.
and it works because they're comfortable in both sides, right?
Right. And
That's
being
who they are.
they have the balance.
Yeah. And so it works for them. For me, in my mind, it just doesn't make sense. Like, it would make sense for me, but I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it work for them. And so I'm like, oh, okay, cool. That's
Yeah.
that's awesome to see that it can work. But just knowing, like, how I am, like,
Right. People know like what their thing is, because I mean, it gets really tricky
yeah.
because of the fact of like sometimes men want women to be, I don't know, stronger or react in a certain way. And it's like, okay, but when I
Yeah.
do this, now you feel intimidated. And then sometimes women want for men to be more emotional. But then when a man starts crying or something, it's like, you too sensitive. I don't got time for that. Like, so
Mhm.
it's like
Mhm.
just the whole jacked upness, for lack of better words, of like people not being able to just show up as their full selves, and people meeting each other in the middle and seeing if it's going to work or not, whether it's
Yeah.
dominant or sensitive or submissive or independent or whatever the case may be. But I wonder if you feel like there's a way that, people and women, specifically due to nature of this conversation, can be
Mhm.
able to feel comfortable if they are a woman that feels like they're more dominant, or they don't have no choice but to be more dominant in the relationship. If there's
Yeah.
a way to feel more comfortable to either a be submissive, or like follow a lead, or be comfortable in just standing alongside. Like, how can people in relationships just be comfortable standing alongside and
Mhm.
having some type of balance of both and it being
Well,
okay?
yeah. What I would say, what I think is very important, is for you to find out who you are, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to own it. Because we hear different things, especially when there's women out here trying to get a man. They're like, what do I do? Can I do
Mm-hmm.
this? Trying to, get all this different advice. And then they're just willing to, like, call you transformer because you just transforming all over the
Right.
place.
Right.
And
Put
it's
it on
just
your best
like,
self to
yeah,
appease.
yeah. And it's just like, that's never going to get you anywhere because it's not who you are. And
Mm-hmm.
so eventually, you're going to come back to that, like this guy. I don't know if you ever seen Ozark, but
I haven't, but people be
okay.
telling us that we should watch it.
But there's a brother of the wife, and he had mental illness, and there was a situation where they were like in danger, and he kept putting them in danger because of his mental illness,
Okay.
and so when they just kind of had like a real talk, he was just like, everywhere I go, there I am, right? And
Basically.
and
Right.
I thought that was hilarious, but like sad in the moment, but
Mm-hmm.
like true. It was sad because it's just like, in this time, like, you being you is not, it's not good for anybody,
Right.
right now. But it's also sad when it comes to people who it's not about them being themselves, that is not good. It's just they don't feel comfortable being able to be themselves. They're around people
Mm-hmm.
who reject them. And so for me, I think it's very important for you to know who you are and to stand in that.
Yes.
And when you're standing in who it is that you are, and the person that you're with is standing in who they are, you can stand
Together.
beside each
There
other.
you
You
go.
can, and then it's healthy because you're complementing each other, and that is
Mm-hmm.
very important to be with someone who you're in alignment with
Mm-hmm.
and you complement each other. And when you don't, a lot of people, are in that situation where they're with each other for different reasons and they
Mm-hmm.
haven't taken out the time to understand themselves. Because when you understand yourself, like that's who's going to keep showing up.
Right.
And, and if you offer who you are and a person is, with you on that, they're in alignment, then you don't have to worry about there being a surprise or the being scared that this person is not gonna
Like you.
like who you are and
Mm-hmm.
still come back and decide to keep doing this thing with you. I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of time when we have that fear, it's because we haven't showed all of us and we are not sure if that person likes who we really are.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head, honestly. Just giving such a beautiful explanation of how to be able to come alongside, because it
mhm,
is that whole idea of being confident in
mhm,
who you are, period. Like whether it's in a relationship, a situationship, like a
right.
marriage, a complicated situation, like,
That's
being
right.
single, like whatever the case may be, there's always a relationship with self going on. So
Right.
as long as you're able to do the work that you need to do
Mhm,
first, because I mean, I'll say first, but also like, even in relationships, because I know there's like a huge wave. I've even myself have been caught up in it before of like, you got to work on yourself first. You got to be in such a great space before you get into a relationship because da da da
mhm.
da. Da. But the reality is, even when you get
Yeah,
into that relationship, there's going to be growth and changes in that too. It's going to be
absolutely.
like somebody holding up a hole, like they just took the mirror, sprayed some Windex, cleaned it off, and held it back up to you again. Like, so it's always a continuing growth period. You just get to a space, I feel
Absolutely.
like, where you've evolved to where it's just like, you're more healed, or maybe you have more boundaries, or maybe a little bit more about what you're gonna like, what you're not gonna like different things of that comes to the
Mhm.
forefront, but you're forever changing, hopefully, to be your
Yeah.
best self, because if it's changing to be your worst self, then that relationship don't need to be it anyways. But I
Right.
digress. But I think you did a really great job in just explaining how it's not even just about whether a person's independent, dominant, whatever the case may be. It's just knowing to being confident in who you are. And when you know
Mhm.
that, it attracts the person that will be a really good balance for you. And then
Right.
it won't even
Right.
have to be a thought of, oh my gosh, but will they like me if I show this side of myself? Or, oh my gosh, is this going to be an issue? Because a lot of times people, it'll complement each
Mhm.
other, because like I was saying
Absolutely.
in the beginning, like, women, like, you could be dominant in a role to where you're just like, okay, there honestly, there's a lot of women that actually don't cook. And I've come across that a
Yeah,
lot from
that's
watching YouTube.
more and
Women, they
more.
don't cook. And they actually, the man is the cook. And I mean, I love that. I love when some things switch around, because it takes the
Oh,
pressure off, because it's like we're
yeah.
constantly in the comparison game. And when you
Yeah.
don't do something you thought you should be doing, then it's like, well, I'm a bad this, or I'm a bad that. Or when really it could just be
Yeah.
that the husband or the boyfriend or the partner just likes to cook. Like, so they just
Right.
want
It
to
could
do
be
all the
their
cooking.
passion. It could be their passion where a lot of us were just, I'm one of those who can cook. So a lot of, even though there's someone who can't cook, a lot of us were raised where that was like important.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it was not said, you knew it was important that you needed to know how to cook as a woman or as a
Mm-hmm.
girl, as a young
Mm-hmm.
girl. And so like, I was making stuff for my little brother, we're only 3 years apart, you
Uh-huh.
know. And so uh, there's a part of us that are still, I guess, kind of old school, where it is that we've been, as soon as we could do something, we were taking care of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
boy,
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
boy or a man,
Right.
and so yeah. But as far as the cooking thing goes, since I know I can cook,
Mm-hmm.
when I do see a man who can cook and they're like, in there like, oh no, I'm gonna cook, and they're not just trying to be cheap, but they're like they're really gonna show off their
Really about to
skills.
throw it down.
Yeah, and I'm like, boy, I might have to start praying, praying for you, like I have to make this happen, but yeah, but I will say though, the first time I met some guy who could cook, who's like really a good cook.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I knew a couple people before, but this guy was just like he kind of led with it, and he cooked, and then he had things cleaned up. The way he was just so organized,
Mm-hmm.
it, kind of felt away. I was like, he's cleaner than me, and I think he might almost cook better than me. And I did feel
Mhm.
weird because I was just like, well, wait a minute,
What does that then mean for you?
right?
Like,
Because that's when I was attached to my roles,
mhm.
like the roles of being a woman. And so I did feel uncomfortable because I was just like, wait a minute, if he's doing all the things that I do, then like, what am I gonna do that's like impressive,
Right,
And
exactly.
like, I want him to be wowed by me, like, wow, she's pretty, she's
Mhm.
nice, she's loving, she's smart, she can cook, she cleans, she makes things like, it's like, okay, these are my things here,
Right.
like these are
That's
all
where the
the
value is.
points, Yeah. And so but then I had to get over it. I was like, well, it's all right. I mean, like, I'm me, so there's
Right. And
more
that's
than
enough.
the role, right? Because that's not me. That's just role and I guess task, right?
Right. Mhm.
But I'm
Mhm.
more than that. So yeah, and that's that growth process of really learning who you are and
Yeah,
understanding your actual value, instead of
exactly.
just the things that you are taught, like through media and grooming and I guess society, imposes on you. Outside of that, who are you? Because
Exactly.
all of those things don't celebrate identity, knowing your identity and celebrating who you are.
Because there could come a day where a person can't do it no more. Like we all get
Right.
older, or we all lose skills, or we all lose abilities. So again, being comfortable in yourself is very important.
Yeah.
And because like you were saying, like when a person is so attached to their role, sometime when it gets flipped a little bit or challenged a little bit, or it's like, well, where's my place now? That can have a huge mental toll on a
Hmm.
person.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, how do you feel like people can take care of themselves mentally when
Hmm.
they get challenged in that way, or when the dating gets tough and they're just like, well, now I don't even know like where to land, or can I even be my true whole self and people will still want to be with me, or whatever the
Yeah.
case may be.
Yeah. I mean, I think you kind of have to tackle it in the way that is, best for you, and maybe a certain way for this person versus me. So, like I was stating with that, the gentleman that I was dealing with, he was good at all these things that normally have been the things where guys are just like, oh my goodness, you're,
Mm-hmm.
a triple threat, like you just
Mm-hmm.
all of these things. And then I'm just like, well, he's doing it like, where's my praise gonna come in at,
Right.
like I do one
That's
level of
nice,
that.
babe. You added the cheese. I don't need that though, but you added the cheese.
Right, right. Exactly. Yeah. And so for me, it was just like I like to check in with myself, and like my older sibling,
Mm-hmm.
they used to say when I was like younger, and I'm still like that to this day. It's like you be in your own world, and I do. And so a lot of times, like I'll check in, like with myself and kind of like, how are you feeling? Like,
Yeah,
why did
that's
that make
important.
you feel this
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
way? Um, because I have two older sisters, and they kind of were like doing their own thing. And so a lot of times, like when I was young, I was kind of like left out. And so I kind of had to just be like, oh, I'm okay with it, like I'm
Mm-hmm.
doing my own thing, right? And so for me, it's like, okay, you check in with yourself, because it's kind of like the other side,
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
you, because multifaceted, right? And so yeah, I just check in and see how I feel about it. Why did
Yeah,
that make
that's a
me
skill.
feel like less, valuable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was because I hadn't explored, that those other the layers, to myself. And so I would say with that, the checking in, that's helpful. I think therapy is great.
Listen, because I was definitely about to hype that up, like
Of course.
therapy, and also
Of
your girl over
course.
here got services. So if y'all need me to help you out, I can. But
Absolutely. Of course. Plug on your own podcast. No. And so gotta do that. But I would say therapy, and I know that some people, they kind of are like, oh, I don't know about therapy, but it's so crazy because they're doing the same thing that they would do with a therapist with someone who's in their family who's not qualified.
listen, you know what? I'm so happy you said that.
Qualified.
It's you're talking already to someone. I mean, it's vastly different in regards to how the relationships,
Right.
play out in, therapy versus talking to somebody in your family. But the basis of it is you need somebody to talk to. So why not talk to a
Right.
therapist?
To get it out, and to free yourself. And then another thing, I think a perk, the first time that I ever, seen a therapist, it was so freeing because at first you're just like so
Mm-hmm.
nervous, but it's so freeing talking to someone who doesn't know everybody,
Right.
or the person that you want to talk about,
Right.
or the source of your
Right.
trauma,
Because then it gets biased. Because then, your people's gonna
Absolutely.
be like, oh, like that's
Absolutely.
not what's about to happen.
Absolutely. And there could still be some bias, but that all comes into play with choosing a therapist and making sure like
Mm-hmm.
your therapist is healed and whole, you know what I
Right.
mean?
A
And
good fit for you. Right.
working on their, healing, constantly doing that. And so, yeah. But when you do have the right type of therapist or whatnot, being able to put it all out there, just to get it all out. Like I think that
Yeah.
that first session is really about getting it all out. The stuff that you may even be feel guilty for even speaking on, because a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times we are holding things in and we feel guilty,
Yeah.
about it, maybe because of the way that we're raised, or whatever hangups that we have. We feel guilty to saying, that this person does these things and you don't really like it, but you feel guilty because you're just like, oh, but they did all these other things for me, so I feel like I can't say one bad thing,
Right.
about them. But it's just like, it's not a bad thing. It is information. You are expressing
Right.
what happened, or you're expressing how it made you feel, so you're not speaking badly about them. You're expressing
Mm-hmm.
what your experience is.
Right.
And that's important. And once you are able to get that out, you feel like, oh my God, I can breathe,
Right.
I
The
can
weight is
exhale.
lifted. Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes. And then you can start really like doing the work, because I don't think that you can really do any work or grow if there's not honesty. And the honesty
Exactly.
has to
Exactly.
happen.
I always say, if you can't be honest with nobody else, you better be honest with yourself. Because, like you said, that quote, wherever I go, there I am. Like it's the
Right.
same thing. You can't get away from yourself.
You
So,
can't. You can't. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, to work on your mental health throughout the process of being in relationships, you have all life is relationships. You have
yep.
your romantic relationships, you have your family relationships, coworkers, friends, all that. And so, uh, you know, taking the time away from everyone else. I love being social, but I finally got to realize once I moved out of my mother's house,
Mm-hmm.
when I was 23 and went across the country. At first, I was like, I don't know, this is crazy. I was like,
Uh-huh.
I'm sitting there pulling out all my birthday cards and graduation cards and putting them everywhere. I'm like, I need to be around people who love me.
Mm-hmm.
No. And so I was going through it because I come from a big family and I'm used to folks being loud, and my mom having events, like pretty much every
Mm-hmm.
weekend, like after church. And so I just really didn't know what to do with that. But once, I adapted and got used to it, was just like, oh, this is important. That
Yeah.
quiet time,
Yeah. Going
being by
inward yourself.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because then you get to kind of learn, how to love you, or to like yourself.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that that's another thing where, to kind of work on your mental health when you're dealing with relationships, is to check in and see how you are. Are you proud of yourself? Do
Mm-hmm.
you like yourself? And if you don't, do you? Because I feel like if you don't like yourself, then you can work on changing it, because it's
Mm-hmm.
something that you
There's
have
always an
more of a
opportunity to
yeah,
change.
you have a motivation to change. But if you are dealing with people who are complaining about something, that how you are, and you like that about yourself, and you're like, no, I really embrace that. I like that. I don't want to change that. Then you might have to rethink who the company that you keep. Maybe that
Exactly.
person's not for you. And it was just a summer meeting, summer fling, and you're kind of
Right.
like, all right, this is cool for the minute, like I got to kind of explore your world and you got to explore mine, and now we're
Mm-hmm.
going to go back to our separate worlds. So yeah, I mean, there's
Yeah.
a just the things that make you feel good. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
important to like to know what those things are. And when you just want to work on yourself, your mental health period is to do those things and to kind of get into that things that make you happy, make you smile in
Mm-hmm.
that gratitude space.
Learning
And
your
then
own love language.
right. Because then it just brings you back to self, and then you get to go back to what you've been doing, and say, okay, yeah, I was tripping. I'm not doing the right stuff right now. So now I need to
Mm-hmm.
go ahead and switch it up. It's just being able to check yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really great that you mentioned stillness, because stillness is huge, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable being vulnerable with themselves and being able to sit in
Mhm.
stillness because they're afraid of what might come up, what they might hear from themselves. And when
Scary
you're able to
sometimes.
when you're able to sit just with you, you're able to tune in, you're able to listen to yourself, you're able to figure out what it is that you need. So that's very important just in taking care of mental health across the board, as well as
Mhm.
attending therapy and not making it seem like you only got to go there if there's problems or there's
Right.
issues or you're struggling, but you can go just to be able to have a listening ear, and be able to have that additional support, especially even on things such as this with dating and just relationships, period. Because if a person is experiencing issues in their relationship with a partner, then a lot of times it probably came up in other relationships that wasn't with their partner. So it's
Oh yeah.
important to be able to have the space to be able to just explore whatever it is that people need in order to help them feel confident in who they
Mhm.
are as individuals before
Right.
pairing with someone else. And so I definitely think that we shared a lot and talked about a lot. I hope the peoples was able to get these gems that was dropped, because
Yes.
listen, V shared some things.
Rewind it.
So you
No,
need
just-
to rewind it, play it back, pause it, get your notebook out, and jot it down, whatever you need to do.
no.
That is what needs to happen. But I appreciate you so very much for coming on the platform,
Yeah.
because I think it's important to just talk about relationships, get people talking, period, but also talking about relationships and things that's
Right.
stigmatizing towards it. Of course, there's a lot of platforms that talk about relationships. It's a hot topic, but
Right.
everybody has something different to add to just the pot, to add to the conversation. And as long as it
Yeah.
goes to that bigger goal of happy, healthier relationships,
Yes.
that's important, because relationships they can tend to make or break people. So I
Yeah.
appreciate what you do. I appreciate you coming on and sharing like your expertise, sharing your insight, sharing your
Yeah.
personal with the Always Live Lovely community. And I definitely want to give you some space to just, tell people where they can find what it is that you're doing, because listen, quality shows that she got going on,
Oh,
quality. So where can
thank
people
you.
listen in, tune in, and just be able to support you?
Thank you. Absolutely. So, my YouTube channel, as I was stating before, is virtual, and then first it's one ST dates. And so for some reason, if you put it all together, no spaces, like if it was an email or a handle, it will come right on up on YouTube. It'll be like the second one down. So that
Mhm.
has all of my content. So it has the first show, virtual first dates, where you get to see people go on live dates, and then I
Super
interview them
fun.
afterwards. Yes, and then what I found in doing that, I found that, as men and women, we really don't know each other. And
Mhm.
so I wanted to take an opportunity for us to get to know each other a little bit better. And also that we don't like each other. I mean, not like each other, but like yourself.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Sometimes you don't like each other,
Right.
right? But when we don't like ourselves, because there would be a lot of vulnerability with me, and I'm not saying all of them, but there was a lot of vulnerability with me. But then the minute that they got on the dates, they turned into the representative, you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so I was just like, ooh, because when I watch my show, it's not really entertainment for me. It's more so like research and like,
Right.
huh, okay, like what am I learning, like from this? And so that's what made me decide to go the route after that, step away from the dates. We did about 10 live dates, and go towards the direction of B. Bailey's Ask a Black Man.
Mhm.
Give us opportunity to ask men questions, men to answer without feeling challenged, and just feeling like that respect was there.
Mhm.
And the men really appreciate that. And I didn't know it was gonna like have this special place in my heart like that,
Yeah.
because I'm really just led by like, you know, helping folks heal. And
Mhm.
so I don't like overthink it once something like just stirs up inside of me. I'm like, I'm just going to do it. And, pray for the best, And so that was awesome. And then we did V Bailey's Ask a Black Woman. And then next was Talks with V. And so we had one season with V, and now we're on the second season, just started on November 6th.
Woo,
And
woo.
and that, I felt it strong, in just all through my body to work on women's healing. And I mean, I'm on the journey too. And so, I believe that when women are healed, like we heal everything, but
Yeah.
when we're damaged and angry and a force,
We can burn it all down.
exactly. Burn it all down to the ground, to nothing. Right. And so we don't want that. We want a healed world. We want a, thriving world. We want thriving communities, especially for our. And so that's what we're doing right now. And those shows, for the live shows, they're on the HBCU lounge. So HBCU, like colleges, and lounge. Y'all know what the lounges are because y'all be at them. Right? and the network. You might need to know more about the network.
Right. That's the piece that, but.
Right. And so HBCU Lounge Network, and that's where the live shows are. There every other Sunday. And so actually this Sunday coming up, November 20th, there will be a live show, and you'll catch that all the way into the new year. And you'll be able to catch those shows. And if you go and check those out, Talks with V on Instagram, or Virtual First Dates on Instagram, you'll be able to find all of the upcoming shows, advertisement for the shows, and just any updates, and be able to follow and connect with me. You can slide into my DMs for a good reason, okay?
Right. Don't be on that. Listen, that's not the energy that we're putting out, okay?
You can send me a message through the DMs on Instagram, and then I'll get back to you if there is a topic that you would like to discuss, or would like to get my feedback on something, or have you on. You can always reach out to me, and I would love to do it. I love to support Black businesses and Black podcasters, and just support any way that I can, and then other people as well, of course. Love you all. But I know that I have a voice, and I'm not scared to use it. And so a lot of times I'm like, I have something that I want to put out there, but I don't have the confidence to to be the face of it. Like, can you help me put it together? And of course I will. So yes. But I thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.
I absolutely love your energy.
Yes, I love yours too. Thank you.
Get you a dope therapist, okay?
Listen, period. Y'all don't be sleeping on your girl, because I help get you right. I'm just saying. Listen, so I thank you so much. Hopefully we can find more ways to collaborate in the future. And by this time that this episode is up, I would have been on, y'all didn't even notice, but I was trying to tell y'all we got things in the work. But by the time this episode goes up, I would have been on your talk show. So I'm telling y'all, you got to be tuned in, because you never know what you're missing out on. If you're not being tuned in, and you ain't following, you ain't a part of the community, you ain't like getting newsletters, you ain't getting none of that stuff. So then who you got to blame? Nobody. But we give you all this free goodness. Like, might as well go in and soak it up for the better good of just your mental health. So thank you.
But they'll be able to find the replays.
Yes, you can find the replay. We're not gonna do y'all like that.
The creative, right? Yes. Absolutely.
All right. So thank you so very much.